Good afternoon. Well, the temperatures have been something today. They started out freezing, actually just below freezing, and now they're at 49, so it's a scorcher. And I'm wearing a longer coat today because I'm coddling myself. There's no wind and it's beautiful sunshine. I have a meeting of the Democratic Committee tonight, and I expect to attend. After all, they endorsed me, and I once was the chair of the local Democratic Committee. So I'm looking forward to that. There are a number of things going on that we don't really cover because we talk about the Middle East, which is important, and the civil trial in Manhattan, which is important. But the moves are slight iterations, although we have to point out that in the Middle East, things seem to be heating up. But let me talk to you about a couple of things that, if I keep them straight in my mind, there is, well, if you follow birds, you could be an ornithologist, right? And there is a birding society, an ornithological society, and they do follow the birds. And I've gone out on birding walks with binoculars and people who really can spot birds, who can tell by their sound, by their wing and so forth, can tell us their habits and so forth. And that's pretty interesting. And one of the reasons it's interesting to me is that how many birds we've lost. There's 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. I don't know, it's just some astonishing number. No doubt it's development, no doubt it's overcrowding. It's probably a question of the tragedy of the commons. I've mentioned it before. That's where you have something like, say, an open pasture in Boston, and people put a couple of cows out there, and that's fine, until more and more people put cows out there, and the tragedy of the commons is now there's not a resource for them to graze, and so you lose that. So we're losing birds. We lose water, quality of water, supply of water. We compromise our air. And it goes on and on. So the tragedy of commons is a principle that can apply across a lot of things, although the original concept was more, like I said, more like the pasture. So now there's a new aspect to ornithology that's reared its head. So for example, there's a bird called the Townsend warbler. There will be questions at the end of this class. A half-sheet quiz, perhaps. Draw a warbler. And they want to change the name of it because Townsend would go around collecting skulls to prove that African Americans were of inferior intellect based on these skulls. Isn't that something? So, and then there's a Buchanan sparrow, and he did something wrong too. And I don't mean to make light of it. The environment in which we inform ourselves is either enlivening or it compromises who and what we are. So, going over to the Irish, I seek the pardon of my British friends. Great Britain, did not want the Irish playing their games. So the Gaelic games were discouraged. The Gaelic language was discouraged. You take away the aspects of identity for a people, and do you compromise and take away their soul? Do you make them desperate? So are we enlivening our society by identifying these marks we celebrate? And you can't apply some sort of simple economic or historic test like, oh, what's the big deal? And there are members of the Ornithological Society who are pushing back. And the reason? They've memorized the names of these birds and they don't want to come up with another set of memory cues to follow them. There are instances that we can drill down that tell us things about our society and what we have to do to get along. Why can't we get along? Well, If you beat up people with sticks, that's a problem. If you celebrate the names of slavers, that's a problem. But there are other areas as well. And it has to do with capitalism. I think of my dad. My dad smoked cigarettes as a kid. When he was in the service, he had cigarettes. As he got older, they started spiking the cigarettes. More caffeine, more nicotine, excuse me. I'm thinking of the low end of the speed spectrum, excuse me. Nicotine. And if you've been down in any of the places where tobacco leaves are grown, there are stories of how if you rub against the leaves, the poison enters your skin, and if you get too much, you'll die from it. But my dad smoked cigarettes from the time he was a kid until the time he died of lung cancer. And the only good thing about cancer, and I know you might think there's nothing, but there is one thing, is that you get to say goodbye to people. You get to talk with them and to be with them. You also get to bear up under their suffering. When my dad died of lung cancer, my brother, who was living with him, was closer to it. And my dad and I, we had conversations, but I don't know, he helped make it more antiseptic for me. So why am I talking about it? Well, the general population should be aware, because there are probably 19 million Americans, the Cancer Society says, who should have checkups. And CT scans can tell you that. Beware of the radiation, don't do it too much. But it still remains the case that if you get it early, especially with the passage of time, there are things that could make a difference for you. But the newest findings say that you can notice whether a person has cancer even 15 years after they've quit. So those in the 50 to 80 range should have that checked out if you smoke or did smoke. The perils of life are compromised by those who would mislead us for economic gain or for other things. So we have people being bad to each other because of differences. We have people being compromised because it's good business for someone else. It's a pretty interesting problem that we have, how we can't make simple judgments. And it shows us that our society is driven by people that ain't so good. Apologies for ain't. So the question of lung cancer, you may remember, and it wasn't so many years ago, all these people in the tobacco industry standing up, holding up their hand, swearing there was no danger from cigarettes, no trouble with lung cancer. And a number of them are dead from lung cancer. When I ran for Congress in 1984, I visited the Tobacco Institute. Remember, I was running for Congress in Virginia. And it struck me as a kind of, they were very nice people, don't get me wrong, but they had all these tobacco products on their desk, a kind of bravado confronting the not too far away specter of death that sat arm in arm at their desk with these perils to their health. So, you know, there were these educated men and chewing tobacco and cigars, cigarettes and so forth. Pretty serious stuff. And people die because of it, ruining whole families. And if you ever looked at a lung after the cancer's taken over, it's this black and white, indistinguishable substance. So, can we talk about something larger than discrimination in the naming of birds, or a cancer that tears apart your lungs. And there is something that even stands above that. There's a fellow, Bill Ripple, who got interested when he was younger in the environment. He studied it. And he said he believes there's a moral obligation to warn humanity about the dangers of not taking care of our environment. Well, we've talked about it before. Breathe the air, drink the water. Is there sufficient water? What is our soil? Is it blowing away because we don't bother to understand what's good farming practices? Are we concerned about radiation among our energy sources? Are we taken in by the fossil fuels? And this is kind of the scope, I was thinking today, of the problems we have. Now, those of us of a certain age, well, we had Jack Kennedy as our hero. He certainly was mine, and I saw him my first year in high school come to the university. I was at the high school at the time, and all these people went in to see him. He talked about challenges facing us, and he was talking to basically a first-generation college. I wasn't at college yet. And he's just impressive as hell. People are demanding that they release the files on his death. Will they do it? Maybe not. Are we suspicious of it? Certainly. How couldn't you be? The shooter gets shot at himself. There are a series of guns. There are people on the knoll. There are people who are missing. There's the magic bullet that takes a turn in the air and hits the former Texas governor, John Connally. So, what are the real answers? I was close with a guy, Walter Sheridan, former FBI, who ran JFK's Get Hoffa squad when Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General of the United States. That's when we had an Attorney General. And he told me that the mob did it, which is interesting, because one of the other theories is that the government did it. We may never know, not in my lifetime nor after that. So what could be worse than these things? We talk about the working man and woman, the middle class, and what do we do for them? Well, I happen to think that the United Auto Workers were absolutely right, and that they were invoking legal tools, the strike, to force a better deal, and the automobile manufacturers, after the unions exercised these tools they had, the pressure they had, the economic pressure they had, jointly, which they could not have had individually, collectively bargaining. They got something. Now, the Washington Post today congratulates them on their successes and says, yeah, but are we hurting business on EV cars? Sure. That's the Washington Post talking for the industry. Oh, yeah, it's cute that these workers, managed to get a better wage having supplied these profits to the company. But in the bargain, did they hurt the companies? Well, if the companies were smarter and made the deal sooner, they would have lost less. But this is the prejudice. You see the prejudice. Keep us ignorant, hurt us, and run away with the money. Run away with your idea of who should be in your society. Run away with the fact that, yeah, it's okay to work, just don't have any power to resist companies that may take advantage of your productivity without sharing the wealth when the money comes to the company because of the efforts of the workers. And then there's war. War is a special thing. People become heroes. They write about it. They're tantalized by it. They're crushed and destroyed by it. Nations are. The saddest things we see, maybe, engulfing these other things that I'm sort of choosing as they come through my mind. thinking about what I've read and heard the last few days, what I know from a lifetime like you, we're encouraged to, say, defer to the Washington Post headline. We have an administration that, rightly so, said we have to find a way to have a ceasefire in the Middle East. We have to stop the war because we're going to kill the hostages. We're going to kill innocent people. We're going to destroy citizens. And there are several ways that they're proposed that we do this. A Palestinian state, Deep Six Hamas, and with Israel. But the reservations are, what about Hamas? What about Netanyahu? And people who propose these ideas are being attacked by their own friends and family for taking any position at all. It's an amazing set of factors that describe a political chaos that's not offering itself for easy solutions. So, what about the ceasefire? Netanyahu said that's a no-starter, and right now, as I talk to you, in Gaza City, the Israeli combatants are fighting hand-to-hand with Hamas. Yes, people are scheduled to leave Hamas, some of the hostages, but the fighting is becoming more intense, and there are no words, seemingly, to discourage these hostilities, and people are walking back their words about a ceasefire, including America, because now America is no longer for a ceasefire, we're for a pause. Is there something wrong with the language? If a ceasefire means you stop shooting, what is a pause? Does a pause mean you stop shooting? Does that fool Netanyahu? Or is that to fool all the people in all the nations on earth as to what's going on? I remember enjoying courses in logic. And for a time I enjoyed going to the debating society. But the difference between the two is a little bit like what we find today. There was, anybody who's studied this material, Aristotle had a system of logic, which was fascinating. And to this day, I use it mentally. I don't talk about it much, say when I'm taking a deposition or making an argument. Somebody makes a statement, all men are brilliant, and then John is not brilliant, so obviously all men are brilliant is false, okay? So in Aristotle's terms, a universal affirmative is defeated by a particular negative. It's kind of the square of logic. Okay, so that's one way to think. But then, what's happening on the other side? On the other side, there's something that's emotional, that's stronger than reason, that casts aside reason because of the emotion, hate, anger, whatever. And these days we see more dominant that kind of an exercise of the human approach to problems. And it doesn't help when we start with leaders who become models for others who don't try to analyze what is the truth, you know. How can we deal with naming birds? How can we deal with lung cancer? How can we deal with workers? How can we deal with war? That's what our Congress should be doing. That's what our elected officials across the land should be doing, and they're not. And I'm hoping we're going to see, but we'll all find out in a week, that in all the local elections across the country, that people are recoiling from this passionate, factually unsupported urge to get what I want, when I want it, as I want it, and everybody else be damned. Is that what we're going to see at the polls? we're going to see people recoil from that. And I don't expect to see a mathematical logic, but I would like to see entered into the discussion more facts than fury. So that's what I'm thinking about today, and maybe it's on my mind in part because we have a meeting of Democrats this evening, and they say this county in Northern Virginia, because of a combination of people who are wealthy and hardworking and still have soil to work, but also have a high-tech bit and bite beltway mentality, can give us some insight on what we may be able to expect from here to be happening elsewhere. You have to ask yourselves, what can Iowa teach us? I don't know. We'll probably see their primaries, but that's not going to tell us very much. It's going to tell us somebody got more or less numbers. But in the meantime, we have to continue doing what we can do. We have to talk to people. We have to contribute to people. We have to think about it. And we have to look at what people tell us is golden wisdom and question it. I don't mean just to question it, to make sure that we think it makes sense for us. Increasingly, we see a phenomenon that can't be justified. And it is how some people can hold two entirely opposite propositions and be for both of them at the same time. And the reason they do that is because people are not paying attention, scrutinizing either the word or the conduct that they're observing. So that's a real problem. And it's up to us to get it straight. Because after all, we are the people. Power to the people. Or at least some common sense. And questioning is key. There's a book about a candidate who's an English candidate. And I found it fascinating when I was young because it seemed to match what I thought. And this young man says, what I exist for is to challenge the rule of thumb world, because my sense of things as they are implies there has to be a better order. That was H.G. Wells in The New Machiavelli. And it's a sentiment that you'll find by anybody who spends enough time thinking about law, politics, and the relations between men, women, and institutions. So, until tomorrow, bye-bye. Take care.